The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome into the latest edition of Crossed Flags. I'm Steve West, sitting next to an empty chair. And the reason why is because Matt has come under the weather. He has let me know he's got RSV, so if you are of the praying kind of consideration, please have him in your thoughts and your prayers as you go along and hope that he has a quick recovery. Thankfully, he's done with his coaching side on youth football, and for the most part, our racing season is done, but we've got plenty to get to as well, because there's one thing that we've said over the course of time here on this podcast and its parent show, which you can see the name right up underneath there, called Championship Racing Network, is that we find we get probably actually more news during the off season than we do during the regular season. And it's strange to think that, but not a whole lot happens as far as real hard, heavy news during the season because they're busy doing the racing. Now is the time when they get all their business stuff done. And the main thing that we want to talk about when it comes to this particular podcast is for those of you that like the blue oval of Ford Motor Company. They are in a weird position here. And I mean weird in the fact that things seem to be going pretty well. I mean, no, they didn't win the championship in NASCAR, but they consistently have been doing very, very well. Team Penske has won, 3 out of the last 4 when it comes to NASCAR Cup Series titles. And they also have Xfinity titles. They also have Craftsman Truck Series titles. They're getting ready to go into Formula One. Think about that for a moment. With Red Bull, which has a championship-winning pedigree on top of it. So Ford is doing really, really well, unless you're an Xfinity Series fan, or what is going to become the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series for 2026. We saw, and we talked about this on the big show 3 weeks ago, I think it was, Haas factory team, the old Stewart Haas racing team. They've been running Fords now for, several years. Let's just put it that way. I think they switched in 2016, 2017. They decided to go back to Chevrolet. And you say, well, why did they switch to Ford in the first place? They were Chevrolet to begin with, right? And you're right, they were. Gene Haas started Haas Factory CNC, the racing team, or the original version of Haas Factory team, way back in 2002, and it was a Chevrolet team, and he affiliated himself with Hendrick Motorsports at all levels of racing, but mostly the Cup Series. And then Tony Stewart at that time was driving for Joe Gibbs. Well, Joe Gibbs was a General Motors franchise. And then they switched to Toyota. And Chevrolet really wanted to get Tony Stewart back in the fold. So they noticed that his contract was about to be up at Joe Gibbs Racing. They made an introduction, hoping that things would click, and sure enough, they did. And Gene and Tony decided that they were going to expand out and become Stewart Haas Racing and run Chevrolets. Well, there's the big fish in a small pond and a small fish in a big pond sort of way of looking at this. Hendrick Motorsports is always going to be the big fish in the Chevrolet pond, and there's nobody else that's going to be able to battle that. And it's part of the reason why Joe Gibbs decided to switch away from Chevrolet, where they had been, to Toyota when Toyota came into Cup Series racing in the late 2000s. Tony Stewart kind of felt the same way. Only so long after feeling like you're getting the rest of whatever's left after Hendrick Motorsports takes their big bite out of whatever Chevrolet's offering, do things like Richard Childress Racing or Stewart Haas Racing get what they were needing. So when Ford came calling and they were offering a nice package, they jumped at it. Well, Gene Haas is apparently a very big Chevrolet guy, so he said bye to Ford, even though he won a championship with them in numerous races, and they were doing really, really well as a Ford Xfinity Series team, and decided he wanted to go back to Chevrolet and rekindle that relationship with Hendrick Motorsports. But because that Stewart Haas / Haas Factory team had won numerous races and constantly competed for championships, they became one of those really, really well-known teams that everybody wanted to partner with, even more established teams like RSS Racing and so on. So when they decided to switch away from Ford, RSS Racing went with them. And those were the last two Ford teams in the Xfinity series. So Ford goes away just like Xfinity does, at least for now, as we await to see what's going to happen in 2026 and beyond. With all the other stuff that Ford's got going on, I don't know whether it's really a priority for them because they've got a good number of teams in the Craftsman Truck Series. They've got a good number of teams and really good teams in the Cup Series. So I don't know whether that secondary series is all that important to them. But at the same time, it is interesting to think that they are actually not going to be racing in the Xfinity series, or what we're now going to call the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. It's very interesting to note that because Ford is one of those cornerstones of NASCAR. If you think about it, they've been with NASCAR for so long, just like Chevrolet in General Motors. And a lot of General Motors brands and a Ford brand or two have actually raced and then kind of gone away. You might remember Mercury. Kids, ask your grandparents. Lincoln also raced for a little while in NASCAR, then went away. Over at General Motors, in addition to Chevrolet, there used to be the Pontiac brand and there used to be the Oldsmobile brand, which are both now gone for, going on 20 years now for Pontiac and over that for Oldsmobile. And then, of course, Buick used to race there too. And then all those brands went away, and now it's just Chevrolet and Ford and Toyota. But it's all Chevrolet and Toyota in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. It leaves an opening. And I am curious as to what Mark Rushbrook and the guys over in Dearborn, Michigan are going to be doing about that because they really need to figure out what their future is going to be. And we've thought plenty hard about what the possibilities are. NHRA is out there, obviously, and they do run it. There is, of course, Formula One that they're going to. But there's other stuff that they could do. Could they go IMSA racing in sports cars? We'll get back to that in a moment. Could they go Indycar racing? And that's an interesting thought because there's only two engine providers right now in the IndyCar series, one of those being Chevrolet, the other's Honda. And Honda keeps talking about and chirping about the fact that they might go racing in NASCAR. And I'm not sure what their total budget is when it comes to their Honda Performance division is concerned. But it is an interesting thought to think that Honda could go in and they could immediately battle against Toyota and create that kind of division or that kind of conversation as far as a rivalry, just like Chevrolet versus Ford. But could Ford get in there as well? Think about the engine package that they use in Formula One. Think about the engine package they use in IndyCar. They're not all that dissimilar. The displacement of the engine size, it's a little different. It's 1.6 liter in Formula One, 2.2 liter in IndyCar. But overall, that's just the size of a four-cylinder engine. You can do that. They're both turbocharged. They both have a hybrid system now attached to them. It wouldn't be that hard for Ford to grab their EcoBoost brand and go IndyCar racing and be an engine provider. Are they willing to do that? They haven't seemed to be right now. They certainly haven't talked about it that much. But a lot of it is a big curiosity as to whether or not they're actually going to do other forms of racing or whether they're just kind of regrouping and saying, you know what, we'll let the O'Reilly Auto Parts series lie and wait for a little bit, and we'll get all this other stuff settled down like the Formula One startup, and then we'll worry about that. So time will tell. But that brings us to the second conversation here, because I mentioned the fact that they could potentially go IMSA racing, and Ford is not totally a stranger to IMSA racing. You see them at various levels, specifically with the Mustang. But they could be partnering with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, RFK Racing. These guys right here. RFK Racing has some possibilities, and I do find it interesting the fact that Brad Keselowski got to talking about how they could go IMSA racing, because Jack Roush, way back in the days when it was just Roush Racing, he raced in what we now call the Xfinity, soon-to-be O'Reilly Auto Parts series. So I found it interesting to think that Brad Keselowski would talk about this team going IMSA racing, which would, yes, revive an old arm of Roush Racing as well. But he decided to choose that over maybe going back to the Xfinity series and being the only Ford team there. There is something to be said about being the only fish in the pond. At that point in time, you're automatically the biggest fish, aren't you? So it is interesting to think. But this shows that in a lot of ways, Roush Fenway Keselowski is trying to get back to the levels that they once used to be. If you go back to the early days of the chase, and I'm talking about when it began way back when, after the 2002 season, when Matt Kenseth wins the title on the 36 points race deal and won one race, as opposed to the guy who finished second who won multiple races. And it made everybody start to say, how in the heck can that happen? Well, it's consistency over 36 races, right? Well, we ended up getting the chase for the championship at that point in time. And that chase meant that we had 10 races, and whoever made the top 10, top 12, top 16, all those numbers have changed over the time, but in the initial part of it was the top 10. Whoever made it in the top 10 after the first 26 races of the year, then it was who was the most consistent over the final 10, right? Go back and look. The first couple of years, back when Roush Fenway, before Brad Keselowski came on board with him, was a major power. Go back to the remembrance of the fact that there were 10 cars in those first few years. Roush Fenway Keselowski had 5 cars in that chase one year. He had half the field gunning for a title. That's dominance. And that's what Brad Keselowski has really done. He has reinvigorated this particular organization. Are they regularly winning? No. Are they competing for wins? Yes, they are. They're consistently getting top 10, top 15. They're now a 3-car Cup Series team. If you hadn't noticed, they've got Ryan Preece on board as well. And Brad Keselowski finished second in the championship race at Phoenix just a couple of weeks ago. So it's not like they're just getting their keisters handed to them. They are competing. They're getting top 10s. They're getting top 5s. And the more you get top 10s and top 5s, better your chances are of getting a win. But he's already thinking about the future of this organization. And that's a good thing. And I do find it interesting, though, once again, that he decided to talk about them maybe expanding out into the IMSA racing and doing some sports car racing, as opposed to going ahead and saying, yeah, we can get into that secondary series. We can get into the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, and we can fill that gap that's sitting there. Roger Penske could do the same thing with Team Penske, because they had, not that long ago, much more recently than RFK did, they had a program in the old Xfinity series. It's hard to believe I'm saying that. I'm trying to get used to the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. It's not as easy to just roll off the tongue. But Roger Penske had one much more recently than Roush Fenway did. He could easily take that and revive it anytime he wanted to. But I don't hear anybody talking about it right now. So the question is what is the future of Ford? I don't think they're leaving racing by any stretch of the imagination, especially considering the fact that they're just now getting into Formula One. And they are a staple in NASCAR. I don't think they'll ever leave it. I just think that what we're going to find right now is that Ford is going to take a break. They'll come back, and hopefully they'll be a little bit better. Coming up this Saturday, hopefully we're going to have Matt, if not in person, by phone at the very least, because there's a lot to comment on. And one of those comments is regarding the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, which is located on the grounds at Talladega Superspeedway. If you've been following the news, you know that an employee that is no longer an employee there got busted for misappropriating, whatever you want to call it, over $230,000 in Hall of Fame monies. Oops. The entire board gone by the governor's office of the state of Alabama. We'll give you details on that and talk about what the future is of the International Motorsports Hall of Fame. Plus, there's plenty of news that we're going to get to. It's going to be on the big show, as usual, on Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time. You can catch it live anywhere you are by going on to CRN Live. Search that on YouTube. That's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. My thanks to producer Molly. My thanks to producer John for everything that they are doing to help me out. Matt, get better soon. We need you back in this chair and on the big show as well. And we will talk to you on Thanksgiving week. Yes, we're going to have a Thanksgiving week podcast. Join us then.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.